All right, let's just dive right into this. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack a truly profound historical narrative. Today, we aren't just looking at some dusty old story. No, we're breaking down the fundamental psychology of emotional regulation. We're going to explore the mechanics of anger, the incredibly heavy burden of guilt, and the art, which, let's be honest, is super difficult but absolutely essential, of staying in the present moment. So, if you've ever laid awake at night just replaying a mistake you made earlier in the day, well, this explainer is exactly what you need.
We're starting things off with a central metaphor delivered by Buddha during a village discourse on tolerance and forgiveness. He said, "Anger is fire, which not only burn others but will also burn oneself to ashes." Now, what's so fascinating about this framework is how it frames anger. It isn't just a fleeting emotion, right? It's a highly destructive force that literally consumes the person harboring it. It's kind of like a double-edged sword that ends up doing way more damage to the person holding the handle than the person they're actually swinging it at.
Okay, moving into Section 1, the fire of anger, a destructive force.
Let's look at how this metaphorical fire ignited in one specific listener in the crowd, a guy who, well, fundamentally misunderstood the entire message being shared. Right in the middle of this peaceful discourse, this angry man suddenly stands up. His voice is hoarse, he is just completely taken over by rage, and he directly attacks the teacher's character. He starts shouting out these accusations of hypocrisy and selfishness, totally disrupting the whole vibe. Honestly, it's a textbook example of projection. It's basically the ancient equivalent of an internet troll taking their own inner turmoil and projecting it onto someone else who is just standing there talking about peace.
Which brings us to Section 2, the calm response. Unreactive to insults. Now, this sudden verbal attack quickly escalates into a deeply disrespectful physical insult, which perfectly illustrates the core dynamic of our story here. You see, the man's anger actually ramps up precisely because he isn't getting a reaction, and this leads him to literally spit on Buddha's face before storming off. He is entirely consumed by the heat of his own rage. But on the flip side, Buddha remains incredibly cool and completely unbothered. He doesn't flinch, he doesn't retaliate at all, he just calmly finishes his discourse and later on walks to the next village. He essentially just refuses to accept the gift of this man's anger.
All right, Section 3, the burden of guilt, the cost of anger.
But here is where the psychology gets deeply, intensely relatable. The true psychological cost of anger isn't always paid in the heat of the moment, is it? No, it's often paid in the isolating, quiet hours that follow. We can actually track the man's rapid emotional descent as the day goes on. First, we've got the afternoon incident. But as the adrenaline drops that evening, he realizes Buddha has left the village. By nightfall, the initial fire of his anger has completely burned out, and it leaves behind this heavy, agonizing burden of remorse. The source tells us he stayed awake all night long, just cursing himself. And come on, we have all experienced some version of this, right? That classic 3 a.m. guilt spiral where your brain just totally refuses to let you forget your mistakes.
So, driven by this absolutely unbearable guilt, the man actually tracks the teacher down in a neighboring village the very next day. He's weeping, he grabs his feet, and he is just absolutely desperate to relieve this self-inflicted emotional burden. He admits he was wrong and basically begs for forgiveness. Think about it. He is literally carrying the heavy weight of yesterday into a completely new day and a completely new town.
Let's dive into Section 4, leaving yesterday behind, a masterclass in EQ. What happens next completely flips our traditional understanding of holding grudges and the mechanics of forgiveness. Because instead of validating the man's guilt or offering some grand dramatic pardon, Buddha just looks at him in utter amazement and poses a simple, paradigm-shifting question. He asks, "Why are you staying in yesterday?" So, the absolutely crucial point here is that Buddha is genuinely confused as to why this man is dragging a ghost into the present moment. And man, that completely stops the weeping man right in his tracks.
He then goes on to explain this concept so beautifully. He says, "Yesterday has passed. I have moved on, leaving all the incidents and things of that yesterday. Now I am present." He's highlighting the absolute futility of dragging past events into the current moment. Like, Buddha literally left the insult back in the village where it happened. He didn't pack it up in his bag, he didn't carry it with him on his walk. He left it exactly where it occurred, squarely in the past. And that leads us perfectly into Section 5, Power of the Present, Applying the Frame. This brings us to the core psychological and actionable takeaway of this entire explainer. How do we actually apply this kind of mental framing to our own everyday lives?
while Buddha highlights that the very act of sincere repentance is enough. He tells the man, "Your heart has been purified. Now leave those things there and come in present." Look, the error itself cannot be undone, right? You can't unspit, you can't unyell, because the past is completely locked away. Continuing to torture yourself with guilt isn't some noble act. It's really just a useless, self-inflicted punishment that ruins the only thing you actually possess, which is the present moment.
So, how do we build this into a daily habit? Well, from the source material, we can extract these 3 highly actionable steps to transform that paralyzing fire of past remorse into present-day positive momentum. Step 1. Acknowledge the error, just exactly like the man did. Step 2. Make a firm determination not to repeat it. And Step 3. Pivot to doing good deeds in the present. You essentially just swap out useless rumination for useful action.
To really make this stick, we have to internalize a pretty stark reality about control. Errors that have already occurred, they cannot be magically rectified. We have absolutely zero control over what is past. But, and this is a huge but, the present is entirely under our control. Every single ounce of mental energy you spend agonizing over yesterday is quite literally energy stolen from making today better.
The man's final realization demonstrates the ultimate goal of emotional regulation here. After hearing this perspective, he vows, "I will make my life better by my action so that there is no remorse for anything in life." He completely replaces the destructive, burning habit of anger with proactive compassion. He realizes that the best apology isn't just crying over the past, but actively changing his behavior right now to avoid future regrets.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this one final provocative thought. What past burdens are you needlessly carrying today? I want you to take a second, look inward, and really ask yourself if you are still burning in a fire of your own making, trapped in a yesterday that no longer exists. Remember, yesterday is already gone for good. Drop the heavy baggage, step fully into the present, and focus on the actions you can actually control right now. Thanks so much for learning with me today.